Dr. Sam Bailey, it's just an honor to meet you. This is our first meeting as well as our first interview, although I'd love it to be ongoing through 2022 with you. You were one of the ones who first woke me up. I was going along wanting not to look in. I was thinking it'll all be okay. Somebody will stand up and, make sure that this is all ethically done. And I'm sure it is a really nasty pandemic, although I'm not seeing any evidence of a pandemic, really. There was this little worry. And then I started watching your broadcasts, and you were so intelligent and elegant in your delivery and your sensibility, and with not a shred of arrogance, wanting to bring all of us along with you. And then I noticed suddenly your podcast seemed to disappear. That really worried me. By then I was doing my own research feverishly by then. So first of all, say thank you for helping to wake me up. What did happen censorship-wise with your beautiful podcasts?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because, I mean, like you, I think for all of us, it was such it took a while to kind of get an understanding of what was going on.
Yes.
And for me, definitely, I was the same, where I was doing my own research, and really the censorship for me, because I had this existing YouTube platform, and I was making videos, and people would ask me questions about how effective are masks, to talk about social distancing. And I felt a little uneasy about doing that, because I thought, well, I really actually need to do my own homework and find out the evidence for this before I start talking about it. So I started doing that. But I've said this before, and I think it's true. I stepped on a landmine accidentally. I didn't realize that when I said in one of my videos that I wouldn't, this is before vaccines were a thing. I said that I didn't want to get the coronavirus vaccine because of the lack of long-term safety data for it.
Sam, I'll just stop you there. Isn't it extraordinary? We all accept that that's a landmine. But isn't it extraordinary that in a country that is meant to be a democracy, and at the heart of a democracy is free speech, and at the heart of free speech is, I, Jacinda Ardern, may not agree with what you, Sam Bailey, Dr. Sam Bailey, say, but as Prime Minister of a democracy, I will defend to the death your right to say it. Otherwise, a Prime Minister of a democracy should not be a Prime Minister of a democracy, because that's what free speech is. You have a right to express opinions. And here we are at the beginning of 2022, and I know exactly what you mean. Oh, Sam, what a landmine. Oh, you shouldn't have said that. That's not allowed. How have we got to this country? So we'll come to that later on. But that, from a doctor, should have been absolutely top of the list of what we openly discuss. Discuss. So you openly and trustingly put out your very intelligent view as a doctor, and that's your view, which you're entitled to have. And then what happened?
So very quickly. So within a couple of weeks, I didn't even realize that what I had done, as it were. I was
transgressed.
I know that I believe we had free speech, like you said, until that time. And anyway, I was filming for a TV show. I was about 3/4 of the way through filming for the second season of a TVNZ show, and it happened all at once. So I got a phone call from the lawyer from the production team saying for me to take down the video, and I said that I wouldn't. Because I believed in everything I'd said, and I hadn't told people what to do. I had just said, from me personally, this is what I'm not going to do it. And I've always had that ethos of, I don't like telling people what to do. I think people should do their own research, figure it out for themselves. This was my belief of what I wanted to do. So I had that phone call, wouldn't do that. They said, well, just cut out the bit on vaccines. And that's when I knew this is what it's about. And I said, no, I'm not doing that. So I got sacked from the show. And then I had this flurry of, it was intense actually. I had multiple smear articles from the mainstream media about me, a fact-check article. Sam. I lost a job that I'd had for about 11 or 12 years. And it was all over my videos. And it was one of those things that I remember I talked to my husband about it at the time when I had the first phone call with the lawyer. And I said to him, they're asking me to take my video down. It's nothing to do with them. It's my channel. And I said, what do you think about this? And he's like, Sam, you know what you need to do. And it was at that moment that I realized it was a turning point for me. Absolutely. I can't go along with this. So it's funny, I forged my own way, and I'd found this book, Virus Mania, which really, for me, was my awakening. And I interviewed one of the authors of this book, and then I became part of it, and I became one of the co-authors. And I had never sorted out, but I believe in these things, whether they're angels or people helping you. It felt like it was pushing me in this direction, and I'm grateful for it. In some ways, it's just been an amazing journey, but it really struck me. It felt political, because at the time too, when this happened, it was very close to the elections. And I thought, how can this all happen all at once so quickly to basically discredit me? And like you go from, I wasn't never as prominent as you, but you go from this golden girl to suddenly there's this really discredited person that do not listen to her. She's crazy. And it's funny, I've always come across, I just do my thing. I don't worry too much what people think about me. But it was a very surreal experience.
That is so hurtful, but so familiar. Boy, let's destroy the messenger. And it also is an insight for all New Zealanders into how this government appears to be running things behind the scenes. Calls go out to heads of organizations who then put calls down to minions, or calls to sell out lawyers. Can you remember the name of the first lawyer, the TVNZ lawyer who rang you?
I just remember her first name was Lauren. I could find it.
What a sellout. So it's quite an insight, that story. So that's why you suddenly disappeared. What was the TVNZ show? I mean, they are gutless wonders as well. What a shameful organisation. I worked for them. I'm embarrassed to say I worked for TVNZ. What was the show?
So the show was The Checkup. And it really, there was, by accident, again, I made another video on this, I found the TVNZ emails that happened at that time. There was someone had put in an Official Information Act request about it, what had happened. And I could see these emails, and it is just really, it showed to me what a farce, what a joke organisation TVNZ are. Absolutely. In the way that they organise themselves and the whole thing. But it was, shameful. As a consequence too, that's even more what happened to me. The Medical Council of New Zealand, all at the same time, that they started investigating me, and they had these complaints about my videos, and I've had ongoing legal battles with them in order to continue to have an opinion. I was often, it's shown that I've been struck off or something. That's not true. I was pregnant, and I ended my practicing certificate in May because I was heavily pregnant and had a baby. And so that's why I don't work as a doctor anymore. But they tried to take my license away from me for having an opinion only on COVID-19. That's what I'm not allowed to talk about.
Sam, that is just shocking. And, the last thing I want to do is ever get into politics, but by God, I will, if that's what it will take to redo politics. We need to have almost no political people down in Wellington. We need devolved, decentralized groupings all around our country, so this tyranny can never happen again. Yeah. And we also need to change our medical system, our media, take over TV1 and make sure that becomes a true public broadcaster again, and get rid of all these corrupted people. And we're going to have to look at even our legal system, I think. So this is a time when New Zealanders, as you said earlier, you have to, each of us, grow up and be an adult and take responsibility and research and say, these are tough times. Everything I believed in is falling away as corrupt and venal. So what did you do then, Sam? You've gone from this, as you say, this golden girl, I just want to do it from the goodness of my heart, share, help people. I've done all these years of study, and suddenly you're being attacked on all fronts. How did you cope?
Yeah, it's funny. At the time, it's shocking the first time it happened. But really, what surprised me was that it made me think, is this all they've got? And, okay, I can deal with this. And it actually made me stronger. And they didn't like this, but I can't remember, sort of in the realm of 80 or 90,000 subscribers on YouTube at that time. And my subscriptions went up. Every time they do some smear on me, it's the same thing that happens. I'm like, okay, if they want to promote me, that's fine.
After that love letter, when they came at me for calling Mother Earth our mother and that she was sad, which every Indigenous culture has always known, I was holding up these articles laughing and going, is that all they've got? I'm not even reading the article or the comments, but I'm just laughing at the headlines. It's like, is that really all you've got? Because I know that we are linked to our Mother Earth, and you know that you're doing something from a higher place. And how wonderful Robert Malone's finding that, of course, now, having been deplatformed from Twitter, his numbers have skyrocketed from Joe Rogan. Isn't it wonderful?
That's it. And I think what astounds me, I don't know if you've noticed this, Liz, but is I think government organisations such as the Ministry of Health, Medical Council, the media, they infantilise the public. They think they're stupid and that they can't figure things out for themselves, or they don't know that there's something wrong that's going on. And I always feel that I treat people as the intelligent beings that they are, because people understand that there's something wrong, and they'll go and do their own research, no matter how much censorship there is. That's what actually surprised me, is I thought, well, I'm going to continue making these videos. I want to do this. For me, it feels like my true calling and my path of I need to do the research and expose things, what I can offer. And once I followed that path, then I had these helpers, and they would come out, and sort of shepherd me along. And I felt like this is what I need to do. And people find you regardless of all the censorship.
Oh, that makes me cry. Yes, I've got the most amazing little team around me. And beyond that, lots of Kiwis wanting to help. And we're tucking those into different roles now. But you're right, the right people come. This infantilism of the public, Māori have the complete opposite, that idea of manaakitanga, which is I will always speak up to you as my treasured guest, as my honoured guest in this whare. And whenever I did a broadcast, I always thought I just want to speak up to my audience, assume a deep intelligence in your audience. You'll never go wrong. And this is where these organisations have so vastly underestimated New Zealanders. So your numbers went off, but then you were ripped off the platforms, weren't you? Your numbers went up, but you were ripped off platforms.
Yeah. I mean, mostly it was that I couldn't make videos on topics. So that's really strongly happened. And people talk about it a lot, but I've seen it. It's happened to me with big tech censorship. I could never post anything on things like Facebook or even YouTube now. I can't post content on COVID-19 because immediately you get warnings, you get strikes, you can't talk about vaccines. So what I've ended up doing is posting my content on alternative platforms such as Odysee, which are decentralized, and nobody can take that down. So and forming my own way. So I've did my own website. I just did other ways of trying to still connect with people. And it didn't seem to make too much difference, but
it's working. So let's say some of those now. I'll just jot them down. I do know them, but just say them for the audience. So where can people find you?
Yeah, so people can find me at my website, which is drsambailey.com. Mm-hmm. My YouTube channel is still operational. I don't know for how much longer, but you can find me there. If you search Dr. Sam Bailey, it will come up. And also on Odysee, which is it's an alternative platform, Dr. Sam Bailey, and even Telegram. I've actually just started my own Telegram channel, which is great. I'm excited about. But there's a fake one of me. I didn't realize that people do this. So have you had that happen to you?
I don't know that it's people. I'm trying to find out if it's people or if it's government-sponsored misinformation. It's also something that happened to Linda Wharton. So you have to really be careful with the Health Forum. Linda Wharton's wonderful Health Forum page, a fake one went up. But certainly this government's misinformation overreach is profound, and I would put with that a lack of integrity, a really profound lack of integrity in the tactics used to try to stop. So, we don't know that, but it's looking like that. And certainly you've had evidence already of the government wanting to silence you. That call to TVNZ to to then get you off that program has to have come from someone who didn't want your voice out there, Sam.
Yeah, and
this
and
is
the
not
other
nice stuff. This is not New Zealanders.
Definitely not. And the other thing that happened, I forgot to say was that's the first thing that happened was there was a Facebook post. There was that Advance political party. I didn't even know who they were, to be honest. And they made a meme of me with what I'd said, and it was what I had said, but it made it out like I was somehow connected with this political party. And then they tried to connect me up with Billy TK, and I don't know him. I've had no. Again, that's when I thought this is political. Like they're trying to frame me, and all I was doing was saying my opinion, from a medical background, what I believe. It wasn't ever supposed to be political, but like you say, it's this clear tactic to try and discredit you.
Absolutely. It's a bit like when these 30,000 march in Wellington and TV3 reports a few signs and banners in one corner of the march saying they're all white supremacists just because there's a Trump flag there. I mean, we are all laughing at the mainstream media now. And my children who are in their 20s would never watch mainstream media. They think it is ridiculous. They see it's total liars. So really, once the older generation that used to believe in, say, TV1 go, their audience dies.
Exactly.
And if you look at Joe Rogan, he's many, many times the audience of CNN, corrupt old CNN. Yeah. It's so beautiful what's arising here, a whole new people's media. But if those reporters want any credibility left, they need to leave their jobs and do come on the right side and tell the truth. So again, it's possible that meme wasn't created by Billy Te Kahika from Advance. We don't know, but it could have been created by a government, stooge who's willing to do those lies. What we have to assume is we're being lied to, we're being misled. And we used to look at communist China, say, or communist Russia in the dark days of the Cold War and think, those poor people, the government lies to them, misleads them, doesn't allow them to have a free voice. We are them. Talk about we are them now. We are them in New Zealand. We are not allowed free voices.
100%. And Liz, I didn't believe that it was possible until it happened to me. And I really thought there is no free speech in New Zealand. And it's hard to accept that, really to deeply accept it and think this is what we're living in right now. And you talk about, I'm ashamed of the mainstream media and what they're doing and going along with this and taking the money for this. But also, I am ashamed of people in my profession too. I think doctors have let us down. And I'm not talking about the New Zealand DSOS, Doctors Speaking Out with Science.
They're wonderful.
Courageous group of people. They really are. But I think people have the sense of being let down by their own doctors for saying nothing, for being silent about what's happening right now. And I wish and I hope more doctors will come out and speak up about how wrong this is.
Sam, I'm talking to Vaccine Injured, and consistently there is a pattern coming through. It is the most horrifying pattern. They go in there traumatized from the jab, injured, often their hearts, they can't breathe, they're really scared and panicked. And they are, it makes you weep. They're often left out. Somebody said she was in the waiting room for hours and somebody with toe infection was allowed in before her. So they're sidelined, they're demeaned, they're belittled. And this is by nurses backing up the doctor's horrors. Yeah. And then when they get in there consistently, there's kind of either an eye-rolling dismissal of, oh, you're just anxious, or it's anxiety, or a searching for some kind of genetic defect that isn't there. Casey Hodgkinson is a classic one. They said there's been no tick genetic defect ever in the family, and it was put on the discharge notes. Yeah. So every person who's being discharged has to get their discharge notes, because even if a doctor has acknowledged in whispering it might be the jab, they won't put it on the discharge notes. They are saving their sorry asses, but they are re-traumatizing people already traumatized.
Yeah.
And this is not one or two cases. And the final one I'm noticing as a pattern is people are being let out at 3 a.m., 4 a.m., vaccine injured. They're saying all the tests are coming back clear, but I'm even wondering if the tests are doctored. Somehow the tests are not picking up anything with the heart. But I am talking to people who are almost more traumatized by the shameful medical lack of attention and care as they are by the jab itself and the injury itself. So we will need a whole new medical system in this country when we're through this.
I agree, and I think it's going to be a very hard fall for many people in terms of within the medical profession. I mean, it's coming. The lie is so big. You can't keep this thing under wraps. And people know, I hear, I'm in Christchurch, and I know of people within the hospital system. There are high rates of myocarditis now, pericarditis.
Absolutely.
Doctors are seeing it in front of their eyes, but I do think there is this idea of Matthias Desmet talks about of mass formation, where people are. It's nothing to do with the vaccine. It can't be this kind of idea. So yeah, it's going to be. I don't think it's going to be fun for these people that have really taken this position and left patients literally to hang out to dry. I think it's disgusting.
And patients you must all get your batch numbers when you go to get the jab itself, if you're going to, and then you must get your discharge papers if you go to hospital, so that you've got this evidence trail, and get the names of all medical people who attend to you. Now, on that note, we are on what feels like the verge of a new low, unless this is stopped, Sam, and that is the rollout to 5 to 11-year-olds. I really do want to put this fair and square on the plate of every parent, every mother who's carried that baby for 9 months, who is lining up. I hear at Parnell School in Auckland, a lot of them are lining up in this mass formation, mass hypnosis way, going, yeah, let's get them jabbed. It's fine. It's all safe. What could happen to those children, Sam, in your opinion? And I want to take it from the fact of the immune system development of a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old or a 9-year-old or an 11-year-old. Is it fully developed even to take this sort of onslaught?
Of course not. And I think the biggest problem is this: we just don't know. We don't have any evidence, any long-term studies of what may happen. And I'm not even talking about 5 years, I'm talking about 20 years. There's been, obviously revelations within. We know that there are non-biological ingredients within the vaccines, and what could be the implication of those things. So, for example, graphene oxide it's a known carcinogen in young children. I mean, I have to say, I don't like to speculate about things, because I always think that's when you get yourself wrong. But I do think there are enough warning signs of what's going on in adults, and this hasn't been tested in children, let alone in pregnant women. And we know that the next step, it's not stopping at 5, it's going to babies. That's the ultimate goal of what they're trying to do. So I have my personal, I've got sons, they're primary school, they're in that age group between the 5 and 12. And I seriously am concerned, particularly if, for things like myocarditis, heart clotting, the immune system, like you say. And the trouble is, we may not see these effects, these true autoimmune effects. It might present in 6 months. It might not present for a much longer period of time. And at every age group, you'll have different, presentations of illness that you don't necessarily, it takes a while to establish what's going on. I remember early on with the vaccine when it was rolled out, and people would contact me and say, my periods are all irregular. And at the time you're thinking, well, how does that work? That doesn't make much sense. And I think that's what my real fear for it is, the unknown of what could happen in this age group. We know that it seems to cause the lymphocytes, the immune system, monocytes to go haywire, where they're trying to clear these non-biologicals out of our bodies, and struggle to. And I really hate to think what is going to happen. But I also feel for these people that are the parents that are feeling like they're doing the right thing, they're protecting their children. The cases that we hear in the news, the media, of an 8-year-old or 9-year-old dying of COVID-19, well, what happened with that child? Tell us more clear. I mean, you can't just accept these things at face value. You want to know what was their background, what was their past medical history, were they in there for something, in hospital for something else? It doesn't, to me, make sense. 8 or 9-year-olds don't just die like that. And it's the lack of information.
It's like that story of the person who was shot in the head and they were put on the list of COVID mortalities here in New Zealand. I mean, that did make New Zealanders wake up. What is happening with the way we're recorded? Even in our news, Sam, when we're hearing Omicron cases, are we hearing the second most crucial fact? How many of the cases of Omicron are people who've been jabbed? Now there are really clear differentiations. So 7 of the 10 with Omicron were people who had the vaccine, which was supposed to protect people, was it not? So we have to dig, as you said, dig deeper on these. I just want to understand children and how they normally, in a normal world, would fight off something like a flu because the charts I've seen, the graphs I've seen, seem to say that they would bat off even COVID or Delta or Omicron. Children's immune systems are very powerful little engines, aren't they, within their bodies normally?
Absolutely. And I mean, there are issues with other vaccines itself. We know that it's also to do with the numbers of vaccines that children are having now. We have had an explosion in conditions such as autism, and we know that there's relationships with these. But I think you're right. Children are generally. The main thing to make children well is their nutrition. Is that if we're not living in the 18th century anymore, we're living where we've got a first world country. Children are generally have very robust health systems. They're getting enough sunshine, enough vitamin D. They're nutritionally getting all the vitamins and minerals that they need. So even if there are illnesses as such, flu-like illnesses, they completely recover, from these things. But now it's become this where we pathologize everything. Children are. I've had this in my own child's school where my child was asked to leave the school because he coughed or sneezed or something into his elbow. He wasn't even sick, but this paranoia of it's COVID-19 and. So I don't. Sorry, I'm going off topic.
That's horrifying, Sam. What will that do to young children who need to be robust and able to cope with life? The fear that must be going on in our young children to lead to later depression, and a sort of mistrust of their own bodies, of life itself, isn't it? It's got that potential.
And both myself and my husband are doctors. We were told. We can't, they overrule us. We couldn't, we said he's well, he should go back to school. No, and this, like you say, it actually caused a lot of anxiety for my son because he didn't want to be able to cough. He was worried about coughing or sneezing at school.
This is crazy.
And you think, what kind of age is this where you can't blow your nose or cough or anything without being accused of having COVID? It's just totally bizarre.
It's become a sort of weird parallel with the witch hunts of the 1600s. It's quite mad. Where do you think this stops? What can an individual do now to become empowered, Sam? I think we now need to jump to all those positive videos you put out where you are empowering people with knowledge. They can go on your site and find a lot about this. But what would you say to a mother who's going, well, what do I do? My child needs to be in school, needs to mix with other children. They'll have to be jabbed. Surely it's safe. Surely the governments wouldn't put this out unless it was safe. What would you say to that mother? Where to begin?
Yeah, I guess it's a hard one, Liz, because I think everyone has their wake up moment, and I don't know what that is for every individual. I definitely say to listen to your gut first and to go, does this all make sense? Yes. Does it feel right? Is there something I'm missing out on? And to ask questions. And this could be to your friends, to doctor, just pause and stop for a moment and think about it. And we know from history that there have been horrendous disasters with, these are just normal drugs. So thalidomide is an example, and that was called safe and effective, and it, and it affected. We know the story of congenital deformities in young children, and there are multiple other examples of this. I did a video recently on a drug called DES that was given to pregnant women, and it made their children infertile. So, the pregnant mothers, their own children weren't able to have, and we just don't know enough about this. It's happened far too quickly. I just think to stop and to do your own research first. And where do you find your own research? I mean, you have to look. You have to, follow Liz. Follow Liz Gunn. That would be a starting point. But I think it's really about also not going along with a lot of these things too. I think that's the shift people need to make. I don't think it's going to come from some magic person, some hero that's going to save us. We all individually have to say, no, I'm not doing this. I'm not going to inject my child with something. And to be fair, a lot of people that I talk to, even if the parents themselves have been double vaxxed, they don't want their children to be. And that's something different, because people were sort of had this faith in the government. Oh, if we just do this, then we can go traveling and I can have my life back. But they've seen more and more evidence that that's not the case. We're not traveling. We're not opening things up.
No,
it's a lie. And but yeah, it's a hard one to know what it is to wake people up. And I'm grateful that some of my videos seem to have helped people, but others it doesn't do anything.
Sam, they're terrific, and that's lovely what you said. But quite seriously, to follow Dr. Sam Bailey, oneword.com, to go to the Health Forum. Linda Wharton is a woman of just fine integrity and intelligence as well. Voices for Freedom are doing some really good ones, some really strong ones here in New Zealand. They're all New Zealand. We're all New Zealand voices. We're going to get Steve Oliver, who I interviewed, to start to do interviews. I think he's got real potential to reach a lot of our New Zealand men. So many women are stepping up in New Zealand. We need our men to step up. And Steve from the MMA gym, you might have seen that, but he's terrific, and he's going to become a test case for all the workers and the employers who are trying to stand up for what's right. And he's willing to take that all the way. We've got so many warriors in this country willing to say enough. These are merely politicians, Sam. We've never had politics and health interwoven like this. And of course, it's not about health. Pfizer is well known for being the drug company that has had the biggest legal settlement rewarded against it. And it was regarded for a long time as quite a criminal outfit. And it seems now around the world to beginning to get that reputation back again as a criminal lot, what they're rolling out. But what do you know about Pfizer?
Exactly. It is a criminal organization. I mean, what I didn't appreciate really until early 2020, and this is coming off the bat of, I worked in clinical trials for a long time. I knew how trials are supposed to work, what happens with patients in the later stages of studies, of just how corrupt now the journals are, the academic journals, and how they're funded by big pharma. They get these experts, individuals who are paid handsomely for their opinions on things and on drugs, for endorsing them, and they are the trickle down for the whole medical system. So, doctors look to these other more senior doctors or to the ministry and go, well, what are they doing? And follow along. And that's the problem with this, is this, and it's sad, because when you actually step back and see it for the first time, you're thinking, wow, this corruption is on another level I'd never appreciated it. And they're all the same. I mean, Johnson & Johnson, I'm not sure if you're aware, they had a case with, talcum powder, the Johnson & Johnson baby powder scandal, and was linked to causing ovarian cancer. And so they basically dumped this product into a shell company, and then that company was because there was a lawsuit coming, and so Johnson & Johnson just completely sidestepped that. And I mean, they use all the tricks in the book so that they don't, they're not accountable. And I mean, isn't that the biggest sign in itself that all pharmaceutical companies, big pharma, are indemnified from any harms that these vaccines can cause?
And even the fact, Sam, that our government signed a contract with Pfizer, and we are not allowed to know for 70 years, what are the contents of that we are putting deep inside our bodies at a deep cellular level? Why 70 years? Why should that even be kept from us? Why should a government sign a contract on our behalf where the people are not given the information? To me, there are so many whys that rise from the contract with Pfizer. But this government too, it's extraordinary that a group of politicians who know nothing about health clearly, and who are just more and more using it as a power grab excuse over us, that they should take over this supposed health role in our lives. Does that flabbergast you as a doctor?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, this is unprecedented. We've never seen anything like this. We're told policies from the Medical Council, which dictate to doctors what you can do, that you must promote the vaccination. It's not an option to question it and say, I'm worried about the informed consent process. Really, that's what New Zealand NZDSOS was doing initially, was just saying, please, informed consent isn't happening. We need to make sure that people understand what they're doing when they're going along with this. And
explain that a bit more, Sam, because Ashley, Rory's fiance, that's a big thing for her, that Rory had no informed consent. Literally, when he went in for that jab that killed him in Dunedin, he had no idea that jab potentially could kill him. He believed the government's safe and effective. What is informed consent in the true medical sense?
Yeah.
And legal sense?
Yeah. So informed consent is a very important process, and it comes from the Nuremberg trials, where it obviously wasn't done, where people were being part of experiments and weren't even aware.
This was in Hitler's Germany when they experimented on human beings in the death camps. They actually just took them and said, which is a horrific parallel with what's going on now.
Exactly. And to frame it, in World War II that happened. So the process of informed consent, it really comes from clinical trials, but it's for any medical procedure, that the idea is, and it usually, typically it comes from a doctor and sitting down with a patient and going through the risks and benefits to a level that a person can understand. And it's a sit down situation. It often takes quite a period of time. When I did clinical trials, you have to do them all the time, and it's not something you can rush, and you have to go through everything. It's not like you can just skip over some side effects and say, oh, it's pretty mild, you might get a bit of a sore arm. You have to explain the ramifications of things. And I think particularly for conditions like myocarditis, this is a serious condition. A third of people will die. And one of the other things people don't realize, which is starting to come out more with the vaccines, is I'm not sure if you've noticed this yourself, but there have been lots of cases of people having tachycardia, meaning fast heart rates. They get the first or their second jab and they develop a tachycardia. And these are in people that were previously well and didn't have that. That is one of the early warning signs of myocarditis. So again, the informed consent process, and obviously which didn't happen for Rory, was that you sit down and you say, this is a chance. And you usually have to come up with some statistics and say, out of this number of people, however, 1% out of 100 will have this, and to make it understandable for someone. But the other thing we know is that they're not recording for adverse effects in New Zealand. It's not compulsory for doctors to do this. And so we don't have, other than what the wonderful work that Linda has done, Wharton, we don't know the extent of what's happening. So we don't have the real data. So it's all this misinformation, or disinformation, deliberately trying to confuse. And also there's the financial incentives from doctors, from people working in these vaccine clinics. People are paid well. I know podiatrists that are moonlighting as vaccinators because they get paid more to do the vaccination. It's you know what I mean? There's so many factors going on, but it's dreadful, the lack of informed consent. And for a 12-year-old to explain to them that they may potentially, there's a risk of death from having a jab, that's not something you normally have a conversation with a 12-year-old. It's just, yeah.
It's horrifying. That whole, it should be mandatory if anybody thinks it's linked to the jab for it to be reported and kept, and we should be having data from which we can graph all of the developments since this has been rolled out in New Zealand, and it's simply not happening. It's optional. Please make sure you report to CALM and MedSafe if you are vaccine injured, and get hold of somebody like Linda, although I know she's deluged, or contact us at FreeNZ and we will do interviews on it. But it's frightening, Sam. Also, I'm hearing many people being told by doctors that it's not the jab and believing it. They have to look at how recently they've had the jab, and they have to write a letter, a full account of when they had the jab and when these new symptoms showed up, because our doctors are not doing the gathering of the information either.
Exactly. And I mean, it's one of the early things you're taught with studies, clinical trials, is that it's the relationship with a new medication. So when you're trying a new drug in a group of people, the first question you want to know is, okay, when did this side effect start? Was it before or was it after the onset? And, the temporal association, how closely that's linked, is very important to establish. So, yeah, exactly. I think it's very important that people document themselves, because we all forget kind of what you're noticing when you had, if you're going to have the jab, what happened and when the symptoms started. And unfortunately, clearly for Rory, they had no, and I mean, it's tragic, but I don't think there would have been anything that they could have done to stop what happened to him. But it's the idea of they didn't know in the first place that this was a potential life-threatening event. And myocarditis, at its worst, it can kill a third of people, but it can also lead to heart transplants later on, so people can recover and then require a heart transplant, which is in itself it's not something that you can live forever with. No. It's a shorter term chance at life. One
of the most horrific things too I'm noticing overseas is they're trying to roll out news stories saying, children do get heart attacks. Children do. It's not uncommon. And you can see the cynicism behind that. And remembering that the world's media is largely owned by a few companies now. RTV3 roots back to BlackRock and Vanguard, two of the most corrupting companies in the world, who have massive investment in big pharmaceutical and who are benefiting from all of this. So we have to look at who owns the media, and these media stories are being rolled out around the world that kids can, it's sort of normal to get heart attacks in kids. They're trying to normalize. It's not, is it, Sam?
Absolutely not. I've done a lot of work within cardiology, and it is completely abnormal. Of course, children can have things, but these are sick children. These are children with chronic health conditions, with congenital heart disease, meaning heart disease that's come from birth. It is not normal, and I hope this doesn't happen. But I'm seriously concerned about the effects that the jab will have on children aged 5 to 12, of their hearts, of their brains, and of course the longer term concerns on things like how it affects fertility, things that we just don't know.
You said you've been involved in clinical trials. What other aspects of the Pfizer clinical trials, apart from the fact that it wasn't done over a long period of time? Normally we can't even call this a vaccine. It's not a typical vaccine. It's a jab. This mRNA. This should have been tested over 20, 30 years to see the longevity of the trial results. It wasn't. And no matter what they tell you, it wasn't. So what other aspects of the Pfizer clinical trials that you've read about really concern you, Sam?
Yeah, so another big red flag was, so just to give some background, is that people have to realize that it's not like Pfizer compelled to provide data. They can show you, they only show you the data that they want you to see. So it's always to have that in the back of your mind, because they own it. they own that information. So,
and you fit that against the fact that they are motivated by wanting vast profits so they can deliver vast profits back to their shareholders. They're not motivated by service to us. They're motivated as a business making vast profits into the billions now.
It's about return on investments, like you say, and Robert Malone's done wonderful work, I think, on exposing that as well. Definitely, it's about money. And it's hard for people to think these are people who are working in pharmaceutical companies. They're not all like that. No, but the objective of these companies is return on investment. So, other red flags for me, it's just been the portrayal of information. So there's something called the relative risk reduction. So when they talk about an effectiveness of how effective is a vaccine, and they talk about figures like 95%, that is what they call, fancy term, relative risk reduction. What you want to know is something called the absolute risk reduction. So that's actually, for an individual, how effective is this at stopping an infection, and on their own terms, it's 0.8, so 0.86%. So it's
tiny.
It's minuscule. So the way that it's portrayed as being, so effective, it's very misleading. And unless you understand those terms, journalists don't ask this. What are you talking about when you're saying 95% effectiveness? Are you talking about relative risk or absolute risk reduction? And it's a classic marketing ploy that they do to confuse.
It's PR. It's PR spin. It's spin doctoring. This government must know that. This government must know the truth.
Absolutely.
This was rolled out as safe and effective when, in fact, even the drug company knows it's a minimal safety return on this.
Absolutely. And effectiveness, it's not effective. And the other thing that they did was they withdrew. There's these things called protocol deviation. So when someone doesn't comply with the way that the trial is supposed to be conducted, Pfizer can withdraw, or any pharmaceutical, big pharma can withdraw subjects from a group to try and make it so that everyone's doing the same protocol. There was an inordinate amount of people withdrawn from the vaccine arm, and it was to change the end result so that there weren't more deaths in the vaccine group. So clearly they're manipulating the information on every level. And again, like I say, they want to show you a particular outcome, and unless you understand how to look, because the thing is, most people they don't know how to look at it, and even if I wanted to, I don't get access to the raw data. Nobody has access to that information, and we won't probably ever find out what that was. But it's you have to be incredibly wary of at looking at, critical of what the information that they present.
And Sam, if you were able to look at that raw data, having worked in clinical trials, you could read it. You could really understand it and make sense of it. Yeah. I also heard that they chose very healthy subjects for their trials, not very vulnerable old people who... Oh. Yes. That was the part that we were all talking about needing protection, but they excluded those from the trial.
Yeah. They don't want any, they can't have any adverse outcomes for those. And I mean, it's always cooked up that they'll choose people that have no previous anaphylaxis to any other, they make it as, there's ways to design trials so that you get the outcome that you're looking for.
But it's so dishonorable for our children. They must look around at this group of adults running the world and think, what a dishonorable bunch. Let's take a beautiful blue sky that we roll all this lot, all of them, even the opposition parties, they haven't stood up for our rights. Where have they been? Where have they spoken up for us? Are they all paid out? We don't know. But we roll the whole lot. We don't need opposition parties if they're not going to speak up as our rights are taken from us. We get a few people in there. Dr. Sam Bailey's the head of health. She's going to roll out a whole new health system. Come with me on this. Let's imagine you had a blue sky to roll out a whole new health system, Sam. Where would you begin? What would be an ethical health system that would truly be about health and not about money making for big pharmaceutical companies who are now showing us all how deeply corrupted, greedy, unethical they are? What would we do in a new world?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I never like to pretend that I would want to be political in any way, shape or form, just by the way.
That's your qualification. You can only do it if you don't want to do it.
I'm quite happy to just...
what would you do even as a mum? What would you like to see for your boys? What would you love to see so your boys grow up to be healthy adult Kiwis?
I think it's even going deeper than that. There has to be a shift in mindset. One thing I talk about a lot in my videos, and it really coming from a conventional training, this was a big shift for me. But as this concept of germ theory is that germ theory essentially means that any illness, or most illnesses, infectious illnesses, are caused by one bacteria, one microbe, causes one disease, and there's one treatment usually for it and one test.
This was Louis Pasteur came up with this. I think he regretted it on his deathbed, actually. I think he recanted, actually. He said, I got it wrong.
Yeah, no, you're right. And there was a lot of friction between Pasteur and another chap called Béchamp, who was of what they call the terrain theory, which is that your terrain or your environment of your body can only become sick when that becomes sick, and it's usually from nutritional problems, from being run down. That's when microbes come in, and their job isn't to harm us, it's to try and clean up and help. It's to try and, like the tree, when it falls over in the forest, the fungi come to gobble it up and turn it back into life again. And this idea that I really feel on a fundamental level, we need to move from germ theory, because to be honest with you, most people don't need GP doctors. They make chronic disease in particular so much worse. I mean, you can pretty much get rid of, there's a chap, a book that's very good called Deadly Medicines and Organised Crime by Peter Gotche, and he was a Danish doctor, and he talked about how corrupt the big pharma is. You'd enjoy it, Liz. It's a great book.
I will get it.
All the big drugs, so things like omeprazole, psychiatric medicines, and again, how they misrepresent the data for their own outcomes. But he talks about that you could get rid of 95% of medications, pharmaceuticals. Wow. It's just, we just don't need them. And they're one of the biggest third leading cause of death in the world. So to understand from a fundamental perspective that health is not about it's not about germs. And I think doctors' role isn't about dishing out prescriptions. It's about teaching people how to be well, and that's been forgotten. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know if I can answer it very well, Liz.
It's a beautiful answer. One of the most inspired videos I once saw, and I can't remember his name, sadly, but it was a doctor in America who had a kitchen in his practice. And in the kitchen were genuine nutritionists. I will link underneath here an interview I did the other day with Aaron Cavill, and we're going to do ongoing with him. He lost 20 kgs since last October. He's helped all these people with diabetes. He's just robustly healthy. And he's giving his whole program away to free for Kiwis because he wants us to be healthy in this nightmarish epoch that we're in under this government. But that kind of doctor that says, no, there aren't things attacking you from outside and coming to get you. If you are strong and healthy and robust and your kids are eating great diets and not takeaway food or KFC along with their jabs, thank you very much. What a reprehensible thing that was. Yeah. Some of the most unhealthy food along with a jab. I mean, what is this government thinking? But if we actually had robust health in us and our children, those germs would not, in fact, they're not even really coming from outside. They're coming from within us, toxic overload from within, aren't they? This whole thing of germ theory is like a sci-fi movie.
I know. And if you suggest the germ theory is so heavily indoctrinated within medicine, within medical training, it's very difficult to step back and look at it from a different angle. But I think you're right. People underestimate how strong they are in themselves and how robust their own bodies are if they have a good nutrition. They do all the basics. But we need to, I think there's almost like an addiction with pharmaceutical drugs. It's like, I must get this, I must be on this, the doctor can fix me. It's very passive. And really the strength, nature has everything that we need. We really don't need that. And I'm not saying, people can obviously break their legs and you've got bones sticking out. Yes, those emergency operations to true emergency medicine, yes, that is incredibly important. But yes. Most of the health system is it makes people sick. It's not a system of health. It's a system of sickness and
profiteering from sickness, profiteering from it. Exactly. I can hear Kiwis cheering all over New Zealand, cheering you say that. Really, it's so profound, isn't it? That I remember saying to my children, if you get sick, it's an orange light. It's like the traffic lights. It's an orange light. It's your body saying, slow down, go to bed, rest. Stop eating any sweets you've been eating. Don't do that. Get back to the good, healthy food that we have at home and rebalance your body. It's a beautiful system our body offers us. And
what a wonderful mum you are for saying it.
I remember my mother-in-law saying, they'll miss out on all the McDonald's and they'll feel they missed out. And I said, well, they're going to have to grow their character and just miss out. And they're so thankful to me now that I didn't fill them full of that rubbish. They're so thankful. But a Chinese man, I remember once said, your Western medicine is very good for acute cases, Sam. And that ties in with what you just said. Great for car accidents and broken bones and acute situations where you need immediate rebalance. But he said it's hopeless for long-term chronic health conditions.
Absolutely.
Yes. It's absolutely hopeless. And pharmaceuticals are hopeless for that, for depression, for imbalances in our nutritional deficiencies in our bodies, all of those things. It just doesn't address any of that.
I know. And another thing I think is important that people appreciate is that for a long time, this has been in medicine, many nutritional deficiencies were blamed on viruses and infections. It's been a classic ruse where if you go to your GP and they don't know what's wrong with you, what do they usually tell you? This is viral. And it's because, it's this easy excuse of, well, how do you know it's viral? It's what's taught from the day one in medical school. And I feel that we need to shift away from germ theory and know, we don't need these pharmaceuticals. They're making us sicker, like the Chinese philosopher or naturopath. I really strongly believe this, but I don't know if you can rebuild the health system in that way to really waken people up. But I think often people realize it themselves deep down that they'll stop a medication and they'll go, I don't think this is really this is really helping me very much. It feels like it's making me sicker. And I'm not saying of course, everyone should be, it's a case-by-case basis, but I think for the majority of health conditions, medicine doesn't have the answers.
And we will put a disclaimer under this. We are not advocating anything here for anybody. What we've said all the way through the interview, Sam, is each person is an adult now. We can't give our power away to a doctor, fix me anymore. We can't give our power away to a politician, to anybody. We have to research, be adult. We have to make decisions. We have to decide on the balance. Which way do I go? Do I lessen this medication, come off it gradually, up my good intake of nutrition, go and see someone who can help me? These are responsible adult decisions that we all have to make. We cannot be infantile anymore. We can't be treated like little children. And I think this is possibly where we close. This Prime Minister has been talking down to New Zealanders for 2 years as if we are little children. And I remember in 2018 seeing some Odysee magazine article where she said, I feel like I'm the mother to New Zealanders, and feeling so angry. How dare you? I did not want a mother. I did not vote a politician and to treat me as if I'm a child. But that's how we've been treated. You will do this. You won't do that. I will tell you what to do. I'll tell you how long. I'll give you freedom back as if I own your freedom. We're born free. We're born free, and we can die free.
Yeah, exactly. And there's such an empowerment to know that you have everything you need. You don't need someone else telling you what to do. You've got it. You've got it all. And I think, like you said at the beginning, I think that if you look around, where is this pandemic? Where is it? You see it in people that it reminds you with things like masks, and we need to realize that day to day life, we're so lucky. We've got this beautiful New Zealand that we live in, this wonderful nature and environment. We've got all the food we need. It's really simple at the end of the day, but I don't like having people tell me what to do.
And may all New Zealanders take that note away with them. Sam, I'd love to talk to you next week a bit more about masks from a medical perspective. I know you've done some wonderful podcasts, and people can find them on your page, drsambailey.com. But I would love to talk to you more about that and more about this rollout. If you have any questions, you can send them in to us, and we'll put them to Sam next week. But if we could do another one next week, I'd love to follow up. It's just been a delight to talk to you. Just a delight.
Thank you so much, Liz. I feel very uplifted.
So do I. If this is the next medical director that we have in New Zealand, if I have my way, I'm happy. I'm all on with that. That's the New Zealand we want. Sam, you're a treasure. Thank you. We'll talk again.
Thank you, Liz. Bye.